So the classic question that I hear often this time of year is, what do you think I should give up for Lent? I'm sure that many of you have heard this question or even asked this question yourselves. But I really like to kind of flip that question on its head and change perspective. What if, instead of asking, what should I give up for Lent this year, we could ask ourselves, what is God inviting me to do in order to enter into deeper relationship with Him, with myself, and with others? You know, it's easy to focus on just one aspect of Lent, which is this aspect of fasting. What should I give up, right? Even those who aren't Catholic can ask this question, and I've heard of friends or family of mine who aren't Catholic who've given something up for Lent. But fasting is only one of the three invitations that Jesus and His church propose to us during the Lenten season. If we look at the Gospel for Ash Wednesday from Matthew chapter 6, we actually see that Jesus speaks first about almsgiving in that passage, and then He goes on to talk about prayer, and finally fasting. So I think this is a great clue to us that really fasting is not the main focus, but it's one of really three invitations that Jesus is inviting us to. So it's important to not forget about the beauty of almsgiving and of prayer as we look at Lent. As I've been reflecting on Lent this year and preparing for this season, something that's really struck me lately is how I believe these three invitations of almsgiving, prayer, and fasting are actually some of the most privileged ways that God has given to us to enter into deeper relationship, into right relationship with Him, with others, and with ourselves. Of course, each of these three practices can help us to grow in all three of those relationships, so they're not just completely separate, in boxes. But I do believe that each one highlights a particular relationship. So, of course, prayer highlights really our relationship with God. Almsgiving helps us to look at our relationship with others. And fasting, while again touching those other relationships, does help us to look at right relationship, ordered and virtuous relationship with our own hearts, minds, and bodies. So at the end of the day, it's all about relationship. It's all about relationship. And a hallmark of any good and healthy relationship is freedom. The freedom to love well. So ultimately, any Lenten practice that we discern, that we decide to take on, should be helping us to grow in freedom so that we can be in right relationship with God, ourselves, and with others. So this Lent, maybe you could ask yourself, which of these three relationships is struggling the most right now? Or what is maybe getting in the way of my communion with God, with others, and with myself? Maybe you recognize that your relationship with God is maybe on the back burner because work or studies have really been taking all of your time and attention. Or maybe you see that your relationships with certain members of your family are suffering because you've grown distracted or busy or stressed. So it's a time to really ask ourselves, how can I enter into deeper relationship? And we can get really creative here. Honestly, I think it's great when our Lenten resolutions help us to think outside the box. Maybe for you, living almsgiving doesn't mean just putting an extra $10 in the collection basket or sending a Venmo donation to Catholic Charities. Maybe it does. Maybe that is what God is calling you to. But maybe if love for others, maybe if almsgiving weren't just a click on a computer screen, but maybe it means spending an hour of quality time with your spouse each day, Maybe it means fasting from criticism or negativity in order to give words of gratitude, of affirmation, really speaking those words to our loved ones or writing a note to someone. Maybe our fasting isn't just saying no to Chick-fil-A, although your arteries might be happy about that. But maybe fasting for you means that you need to remove some distractions in your life by cutting out the Instagram app on your phone or the YouTube app on your phone. Or maybe it means that instead of playing video games or watching movies in isolation, you'll do that only when you're in community, only with friends or family. Perhaps you already have a solid habit of prayer in your life right now. If you don't, this would be a great time to start that habit. But maybe, growing in prayer doesn't mean adding minutes or hours to your daily rhythm of life, but maybe just increasing the quality of that time. Perhaps Lent is a great opportunity to actually get out of the house and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament in a church or chapel. Or maybe, again, it's not adding extra time or extra devotions, perhaps, but removing what may be blocking that relationship with God from flourishing. What would it look like if you were to receive God's mercy and forgiveness and confession every 2 weeks instead of every 2 or 3 months, right? So we can get really creative here as we look at prayer, at almsgiving, and at fasting, and understand what's going to help me grow in relationship. Another question that I like to ask myself in thinking about Lent is, what is a virtuous habit that I would love to build for the rest of my life? Because if we arrive at Easter morning and we go back to exactly where we were on Ash Wednesday and nothing has changed, then perhaps we really haven't taken advantage of that Lenten season as well as we could have. So thinking about, Lent in a way, it's like a great excuse, right, to discern a new virtuous habit that's going to help you grow in your relationship with God for the rest of your life. Ultimately, Lent is not a self-improvement project, though. That's not the goal. And so if we're losing sight of the relationships that we're entering into, then we're kind of missing the point of this holy season. Lent is really meant to be an intensive training in a life of intimacy. That's right. Lent is like boot camp for intimacy and communion. So let's call upon the Holy Spirit that He can send an outpouring of His grace to each one of us this Lenten season. He can help us discern a way that we can concretely enter into the season of Lent. And let's ask for that freedom of the children of God so that we can really learn to love well our God, our neighbor, and ourselves. God bless you each, and have a good and holy season of Lent.